Hello and a warm welcome back to Talk Norwich City. It's been a truly chaotic few weeks in the landscape of the Canaries. What better person to catch up with than Connor Southwell of the PinkUn? He has been across everything, even on days off. He has been working very hard. So I'm hoping whoever your boss is, Connor, they're paying attention to this and I'm rewarding you fairly for it. Couple of games into the competitive season, a championship defeat to Oxford United, a League Cup win against Stevenage. I mean, what's the mood from your end at the moment, all things considered?
Yeah, I think it's definitely much improved after what we witnessed against Stevenage in the League Cup in terms of style of play. And I think really, certainly from my perspective, and that's all I can really speak about, I think I've gone into this season probably with the expectation that it's going to take time. I think I said on one of our podcasts that I felt that August in particular was going to be very tough because of the various transfer scenarios and where the squad is at and whatnot. It kind of still feels like from a squad building perspective, we're in July rather than in August at the start of the season. So such is life. But I think what was important for me was certainly from a footballing perspective to see some green shoots in terms of what Johannes Torup wants to do, in terms of his ideas and his identity. We didn't get that at Oxford. I thought we got more of that against Stevenage, certainly in the goals that Norwich City scored, which were beautifully crafted. We have obviously some major deficiencies as well in terms of set pieces and probably defensively more broadly. So, yeah, probably feeling a little bit more relaxed today, Wednesday, as we were recording this, than perhaps I was 24 hours ago ahead of Stevenage. So, yeah, all in all, I think they're probably in an okay position. But as we know, you lose again on Saturday and it probably tips the other way. So as football works. But yeah, I think as long as Norwich continue that building process, that's the most important thing for me.
And I think Johannes would have known himself that this would have been a massive rebuilding job when he took things on. Do you think that he would have expected as much off-field drama as he's maybe had? We've obviously had the Jonathan Rowe situation. We've had the change of ownership with Delia and Michael and Jones stepping away and Atanasio and co coming in. I mean, it's been far from simple for him, has it?
Yeah, exactly that. And I think, he's done really well to handle all of that and take it in his stride. And, throughout it, he's communicated clearly. He's communicated with honesty, I think, a lot, which is what fans appreciate, and with calmness. I think all of those principles he's kind of used to navigate those crises is strong, but those various twists and turns that he's had to face as Norwich City head coach, particularly the John Rowe element. And I think, obviously had a similar but probably less situation with Adam Ida in pre-season in terms of discipline, and I think he felt that was probably really important at that stage to almost lay the law down to the squad, I think, and send a message to them as much as it is sending a message to John Rowe. So yeah, he's not had it easy, and I think there's probably Norwich managers who haven't had what he's had to endure in the first week in their first year in the job. So the fact that he's managed to navigate all of that and hopefully, fingers crossed, last night was evidence of him building a really positive football style. I think it bodes well for the type of coach that he is. Still incredibly young. He's only been a head coach for 18 months. So yeah, I think it all bodes well. But you're right. He's been handed a hospital pass really in this first couple of months in charge, and he's had to deal with some remarkable things.
Yeah, he really has. I mean, we're both at Oxford, and I think you mentioned on your video analysis, and also read in the various articles in the PinkUn this week, that we almost had one of those Daniel Farke Millwall moments at Oxford in a sense, with probably both Shane Duffy and Grant Hanley to varying degrees, similar to what we had with Russell Martin back under Daniel Farke's early reign. It feels as if, doesn't it, that was maybe a moment that was required to almost kick us into that new transition, particularly with on-field talent.
Yeah, agreed. And I think particularly when it comes to some of those experienced players, you've got to put yourself in Torup's shoes a little bit. He's 35. He's walking into a new country, a new club. Your dressing room's full of experienced players. You almost need to pick your battles a little bit, particularly when you're trying to implement a style of play. And as we've spoken about, you're juggling other things that really you shouldn't be juggling in your first 2 months in the job. Almost to then go and pick a fight with a load of experienced players, that probably isn't wise. So you almost need a body of evidence to then allow you to make decisions. I probably felt we would get a game like that or a situation like that probably didn't expect it to come as quickly as it did. So I think hopefully what it allows him to do is say, look, we've tried it. Here's the evidence. Here's why I'm making this decision. Here's why I'm moving in that direction. I think it was pretty clear and quite telling, actually. Grant Hanley wasn't used at all in the cup game, whether that's, what will happen going forward or not. Shane Duffy obviously was, but it feels to me, if they can get Cordoba back, and it sounds like he's going to be back for the weekend, then maybe those two options probably won't be his front line. So, yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how he manages that, because clearly you need experience and you need players like that in the dressing room, because they're strong, they have a lot of influence, you need their buy-in. And I think it probably speaks to where we're at with him at the moment. And it was true of Farke as well. You think about some of the personalities he had in his dressing room when he walked in. You mentioned one, Russell Martin, Cameron Jerome, Stephen Naismith was in there at the time. There's a host of experienced players that he had to try and get buy-in from. And that's extremely difficult when there's that, you're not the guy that brought them in, or there's maybe not that instant buy-in. And I think what Torup needs to do now, and this is why I think the recruitment is so important more broadly, is develop that core of his side, that those players that are completely bought into what he wants to do, that feel like they owe him something, and Ben Napper as well, and that he almost is able to forge those relationships with. And that's the challenge, to obviously mix that then with the current dressing room. And that cultural point is the bit that probably takes a little bit more time than perhaps people realise. Absolutely.
You say recruitment there, and I think we know how quickly things move, and there's been a couple of transfer rumours this morning on the PinkUn. I'm sure everyone will be checking out and getting excited and agitated about in equal measure. It's probably not fair to go through the kind of one by one situations, because by the time this is released, I suspect things will look very different. But how different do you think the squad will look when you compare the starting 11 that we had against Oxford on opening day compared to what it will look like in 3 weeks' time when the transfer window's shut?
Oh yeah, drastically different. Feels like that to me. I think we're beginning to see some settled elements of his team. I think the midfield that we saw against Stevenage is probably what Norwich will go with this season. Although they want to add another midfielder to that, so potentially even not that element, but. When you look at that back four, that's the big one for me that I think you see changes in. Obviously, Doyle started at left back, which I think we could all foresee, but those two centre backs probably don't feel to me like the combination. Whether individually they will have a part to play, and I'm sure they will. But you've got Cordoba in there. Brad Hills has obviously done very well. I know you guys have spoken about him a lot. Jayden Warner as well, who's almost gone under the radar a little bit. But again, I think there's some really positive signs in pre-season from him. So they're quite well stacked in terms of those areas. I think there's now a debate in terms of the wide area, because we don't know what's going to happen with Jonathan Rowe. Christian Fashnak looks like he's going to be out for a period of time. I thought Abu Kamara, that was the first game on Tuesday night where I looked at him and thought, hello, you sort of introduced yourself a little bit. But it sounds like they'd still like to potentially add a wide option. We know obviously there's moving elements at the moment in the striking area. So yeah, all of those elements mean that this is all to play for. This could be complete. It's in a state of flux. It could be completely different as you map out in a few weeks' time, come the end of August. And I think for everybody, Torup in particular, but for everyone at Norwich, and probably some of those players as well who maybe just have a wandering eye somewhere else, the closing of that window feels like a really big moment, because it'll allow everyone to get their heads sort of ready and where they should be in order to then go and attack the season. So that's why I think August is going to be different. It's going to be difficult because of all of the spinning plates and turbulence that we've mapped out there. So yeah, in short, it could look a lot different.
Absolutely. We were speaking before the Stevenage game, and I think the word that often pops up is expectation, and within the club they will have expectations of where they deem they should be finishing this season. Fans will have differing expectations, and I guess that's what your basis of hope or disappointment is kind of is pulled from. I mean, from your view, with your kind of journalistic / fans hat on, and we can mix the two here, like, what are your expectations for this season in terms of league position and where we finish?
I think in our podcast I went 13th, which is probably about where I see it for the reasons that I think this is going to be a bit of a slow burner. I think I labelled it as the Mario, what I would hope to be the Mario Vrancic campaign, which is probably starts a bit slowly, but hopefully gets better as the season goes on. And by the end, we're all thinking, goodness me, in year 2, this is going to be incredibly exciting. So yeah, for all
dodgy haircuts along the way.
A few dodgy haircuts along the way. Yeah, there's a few of those for sure. So that kind of feels to me like where I am headwise, but to be honest, and might sound like a bit of a bizarre statement. I think genuinely, as long as Norwich City aren't in trouble at any point, and by trouble I mean embroiled in any sort of relegation scrap at any stage, then I don't think it matters too much really, because it's quite clear for all of the reasons that we've mapped out. And you only have to look at their transfer business this summer. Sarah's gone already. Adam Eder, at time of recording, is very, very close. That probably be done in the next 24 hours or so. Even though he wasn't perhaps a major part. John Rowe as well. We don't know how that saga ends. Josh Sargent. We don't know whether he'll be a Norwich player come the end of the window. All of these elements make it very difficult, I think, to say with any reasonable belief that Norwich can finish amongst the challenges in the division. So you only have to look at that team on Saturday. It was 10 of the 11 players were here last season, and some of those weren't first team regulars. They were players who played bit part roles. It was probably an inferior side to the one that Norwich had last season. So by virtue of that, coupled with obviously cultural shifts, playing style shifts, squad profile shifts, all of those elements, they take time. And for me, that probably means that this bubble's under the surface for a little bit. And yeah, that it might be a little bit of a testing beginning of the season.
I was chatting to a few fans before the game yesterday for Radio Norfolk, and kind of asked the same question, and I was surprised with the response. And they were kind of led into the question how disappointed they were against Oxford and how the squad is so different. And then I said, well, where do you think we'll finish the season? And the response from everyone was playoffs, and that shocked me. But I understand where that comes from, Connor, in a sense of we've sold Gabby Sarah for 20 million quid, let's say. It looks like Adam Eder is going to go out for, let's call it 10. John Rowe will be maybe following for the same. Josh Sargent's being linked away for big money. So suddenly that pot of incoming cash is quite significant. And you can understand from a fan's perspective when you go, okay, we've sold all of our best players, we've brought in good money for them. Playoffs maybe should be or at least in their heads, it's the expectation because the money is there to spend. Can you kind of see that argument?
Oh yeah, I can totally understand it. And I think whenever Norwich City are in this level, because of their name, because of what they've achieved at this level, I think those expectations are right and they're fair. And those fans that feel that way are completely justified in thinking that. I just feel personally there is too many elements at the moment in the pot that mean that this is going to be a bit of a slow burner. You're looking at different sort of wires coming together and connecting to create something. And there is a possibility and there is a world that this all happens quicker than we hope or quicker than we expect. Sorry, not quicker than we hope, but quicker than we expect. And it's been a long few days. Quicker than we expect. And Norwich do go and kick on in such a way that means that they could have a strong finish. And equally, what I would add is, look at last season as an example. Norwich were 17th in November and they finished inside the top 6. So if you can go on a run and you can improve, then actually you can make up for a slow start. I don't think any of us would welcome the type of stress levels that it took last year in terms of that winning run and that home form, but there is a possibility there. So yeah, I can completely understand it. I think they have a lot of talent in that squad and they'll add more to it. But again, it's maybe I'm just naturally skeptical, but I just look at it at the moment and just feel like it's going to take a little bit of time.
Yeah, it's I think transition's the buzzword at the moment, and something that's certainly going to change the landscape of the way this club looks, both in the short term and long term, is a Norfolk Holdings group kind of led by Mark Atanasio coming in, and Delia and Michael's kind of shares diluting it in a sense. How do you see that going forwards in terms of, will we be able to keep our better players for a longer period? Will there be more player investment? Does it mean a more sustained Premier League charge and a sustained Premier League kind of future where, if and when we get there? I mean, how do you think it looks from someone that's been on the inside of this for quite some time?
Yeah, I think the first thing to say is in terms of the short term, I don't think it changes too much because basically everyone inside the football club has been operating as if this was the case anyway. Whenever there's been so right now, as a pertinent example, whenever there's been an option to sign a player, it's the phone calls are being had with Mark Atanasio. They're not being had with Delia and Michael with the greatest of respects, and similarly in other financial areas. So this has been kind of the working case for a long time. It's now just being put into practice. But what does it do? It strengthens their position. It doesn't mean that they're not going to sell players, because very few clubs are selling clubs, and the reality of the fact is where Norwich are, that there are probably two reasons that players leave, and that's competitive because they can go to somewhere that's higher and play better football and better themselves, and financial, and that isn't the case at top Premier League clubs or Real Madrid or whatever, where those two elements aren't there and aren't on the table. So those will still be very live, irrespective of who Norwich's owners are. I think what it does do is just strengthens their cause. So it may be that that they don't have as they have had this summer, a black hole that needs filling every year through player sales. There's another way then to fill that hole through financing and through people investing into the club and whatnot. So it puts them in a stronger position in terms of getting value for their assets. And I think it kind of works as a two-way thing. So people always talk about spending more money, but if you look at Brighton, for example, I know everyone references it, but you look at what they do really successfully and what they've done with Brentford as well. Another example is they've actually raised the threshold that they sell players for. So it used to be 20 million, now it's 100 million. And what that does is that means that the amount of money that you can spend goes from 5 million for every 20 million sale to 20 million for every 100 million sale. That, I think, is the aspiration for Norwich to get to. It's about developing those players, because if those two clubs have proved anything, it's that actually you can sell players and still make progress and still improve, providing your recruitment and your structure is in place, which they're trying to implement at the moment in terms of data. So, yeah, from a financial perspective, Norwich aren't going to drastically now go and sign a load of players who are worth 20 million quid, but equally it puts less pressure on them every year to constantly sell their best players. And it means if they're in a situation like this summer where Gabby Sarah went and that helped them financially, it means that they can then dig their heels in on Jonathan Rowe for a value. They can dig their heels in on Josh Sargent in terms of their value and not sell those players unless they want to for footballing reasons. So that, in essence, is what it does from a transfer perspective. And then off the pitch, it's obviously not completely, but it's wiped off £59 million of debt for the football club, which is for where Norwich are and what they are at the moment is absolutely massive. So it's secured their long-term future in that respect as well.
Certainly felt like a natural and a progressive next step. Just finally, Connor, on that kind of recruitment point that you made there, and really implementing data as most clubs are to try and be more shrewd in the transfer market. I think you've mentioned it quite a few times in your various assessments of things. It does feel as if there's a little bit more of a pattern and the profile about some of the incoming similar age kind of youth type players, and even with the rumours that are coming through at the moment, it feels as if there's an identity about the way that we're going about things now, which at least at the moment feels positive.
Yeah, and you break down the four signings that they've made at time of recording. It's Jose Cordoba, who's early 20s. Ben Cresene, who's what was he, 20, Callum Doyle, who's 20, and Amankwa Forson, who's 21. So that's a very clear pattern emerging. They're obviously very close to, I won't try and say his name, but a Turkish striker who's 22 as well. So we can see that there is a clear pattern emerging in terms of the type of profile they want. And that fits really with the last point, which is if you're a club that has aspirations of selling players in that way to better yourself, then you need to sign players that you can build as assets. So Amankwa Forson is a great example. I think we've all seen in his opening two games the type of talent that he is. There's belief that they can, with time, with Johannes Torup's coaching, develop him into the next one. Maybe not in the short term, but definitely in the next 2 to 3 years. So to do that, you have to have young players that people want to buy. I think we see in the market at the moment, clubs will sign or pay more for potential, which is a big thing in the Adamida deal. So yeah, I think that is clearly the direction of travel that they want to go. And it's probably what frustrated me last year, really, because for a club like Norwich, where you do have to make major sales, and they do, it's a reality of where they are in the football food chain. To then go and sign loads of 30-year-olds flies in the face of that, because they're players who don't have any sell-on value. So it's a combination of that. And equally, you can also, young players are coachable. They are more willing to buy in as a general rule of thumb. They're more moldable. So I think all of these things make them more attractive, but equally it speaks to, I think, the point I was making earlier. It gives Johannes Torup a real core of a squad who are young, energetic, willing to buy into what he wants to do, and just shifts the culture ever so slightly. So all of those elements, I think, are at play. And of course, they're obviously players who they think can really contribute on the pitch as well. It's not just all about asset building, it's about club development. So these are players that they hope will grow with Norwich, and Norwich can grow with them. And there'll be cases where players move quicker than the club do, and there probably will be cases that the club moves quicker than the player does. So I think it's, if I'm a Norwich fan looking at that group of signings, I'm probably incredibly excited and incredibly pleased because, as you said, there is a very clear approach and direction of travel there, which I think everyone wanted and can get behind.
Yeah, just finally, as someone kind of that, you speak to those involved at the football club on pretty much a daily basis, what would you say that the overall kind of mood and culture is around the place at the moment? There's obviously been a lot of change. It's been a difficult couple of years, if we're being honest. I mean, what's the feeling around the place at the moment?
Yeah, I think you can separate this slightly from off pitch to on pitch. Off pitch, I think, for all the reasons that we've spoken about in terms of what they're building, recruitment wise, financially, the owners, the transition of ownership. I think there's an incredible amount of excitement and enthusiasm about what they're trying to do, and actually probably an impatience trying to drag the club to where they want it to be. On pitch, I think that probably takes a little bit more time because you've got a group there that is a little bit muddled. It's made up of basically 4 head coaches worth of players. You've got players in there from Farke, from Smith, from Wagner, from Torup now as well. That's very difficult. That's very difficult. You're always going to get probably little ripples and little factions within that. So that for me is the element that I think will take time, getting that squad into a position where most of it, if not all of it, is in a position where it wants to buy in and wants to play for Norwich City and maybe isn't looking elsewhere. So that's the key point for me, and that's probably the biggest challenge for Torup. I think definitely in year one to try and he said it before as well. You've got to build, of course, and you've got to try and get the style of play to where you want it. But equally, you can't lose the buy-in from supporters, from players, and that means you have to get results as well. So that balance is very difficult. But yeah, at the moment, it feels like there's work to do in terms of the on-pitch culture, but in terms of off-pitch culture, I think it's pretty positive.
So much going on at the moment, and the PinkUn's a great place to stay across it all. Connor, thanks so much for the catch-up, and I'm sure we'll speak again very soon.
No, thanks, Jack. Appreciate it.